Yeah, honestly.
I know.
How are you?
I'm good, short, but feels like the longest week, right? But I'm glad that we're ending on this note, talking about whiskey. Like, what better way to end the week?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'll jump right in. I obviously we spent some time this week, so I'm excited to kind of dig into some more of that conversation and have everyone joining us hear more about everything you're doing. So yeah, I'd love for you to kick things off and just kind of share a little bit about Rabbit Hole. Don't leave any details out because I think the story that you told me was pretty amazing. I think I repeated already maybe to three different people. So give me the background on how you got there and what everyone should know about Rabbit Hole before we jump into some specific questions.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I think the story that you're alluding to is kind of how I got involved. The founder of Rabbit Hole is my cousin, Kava Zamanian, brilliant, brilliant guy. And I had never met him before. And I was living in Toronto at the time, a serial entrepreneur, always on the marketing side of things. And I had the opportunity to go on MasterChef Canada, and I was a top five finalist on there. And I guess this how the story goes. When it was being syndicated in the U.S., he had seen it with his family, and he was watching it with his family. And he's like, "Holy shit, that's my cousin over there." And I guess he kind of just fell in love with the aesthetic and just what was being shown on TV, and so he shot me a Facebook message, and I was like, "Who's this guy?" I never met him before, and so ended up calling him, and he basically said, "Hey, listen, I'd love for you to come and check out what I'm doing. I'm doing something really special." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm starting a whiskey brand." This is about 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I said, "Man, you are batshit nuts." I apologize. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. Um, and and so from there, he's like, "Just come out and check out what I'm doing." So I ended up coming out there. It's coming out to Louisville, which is where I'm at right now. And I just fell in love with his vision. I really fell in love with his vision. I fell in love with his dream. I fell in love with how he was really taking this brand and his vision for how to take this brand to market. And I feel like I could be a really, really big asset. I think whiskey in general is a very legacy oriented industry, right? There was room for disruption. And what a better way with a brand named Rabbit Hole. And so basically, he founded it in 2012. It took some time to kind of get us to market because one of the big things that we did at Rabbit Hole from day one, which was huge at the time and still very big. In our industry, there's a lot of purchasing of liquid, other people's liquid, and placing it in bottles and calling it their own, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just letting you know that that's kind of what the norm is for the usual, because as you can imagine, it's a big, big bet to lay down your own whiskey prior to even knowing if it's going to be a success. And so he didn't want to do that. He wanted it to be his recipes from day one. And it was an uphill battle to be able to go find a distillery at that time, now 7, 8 years ago, that will be able to contract distill our recipes, right? His recipes. And so think about it at that time, nothing's going on. There's really no brand. He knows where he's going. We like to look at it kind of like a book. We know where it starts and where it ends. How do we fill in that middle to kind of get to our end goal? And that was a good $8 to $10 million bet on whiskey, not knowing what it's going to taste like. And so, a lot of this stuff was really what kind of made me go down my own rabbit hole and fall in love with this dream and understand that, spirits has such a special space in my heart. If I could be a part of this and if we could build a legacy on something so grand and special, my God, what could we do? So fast forward in a nutshell, we started selling in 2017, was basically our first bottle ever sold. Really real quick, real slow roll, 2 to 3 markets, regional markets. Fast forward 1 year later, our distillery was built. We opened on Derby in 2018. It's about the 15th, 16th largest bourbon distillery in the world. It was just dubbed the architectural icon of the distillery trail. And fast forward a year later, we ended up partnering with a really great group called Pernod Ricard. The big reasons why we decided to partner with such an amazing group was not only because we loved their culture, but there was a real intimacy about it. We ended up befriending the CEO and the family owner of actual Pernod Ricard out in Paris, and we really fell in love with what they were trying to do. But most importantly, it wasn't an acquisition. It was a partnership, right? And so they purchased all of our initial shareholders, and Kaveh and myself kept our shares in the company, and we're completely autonomous in the sense of how we want to run this brand and keep it a family.
Love that. I think such a fascinating story. I mean, I think if anything, I'm going to start returning phone calls to my family members because maybe they'll have an opportunity like that. But yeah, such an interesting story. I mean, I think we talked a little about this earlier in the week, just about, building a brand and sort of what you're doing. Obviously, you guys put so much effort into the product side of things and such a big investment in that story, obviously. And I think that clearly stood for something. You made a big move. You're connected from a family standpoint. How do you think the whole standing for something, which is incredibly important in younger generations today, plays a role in sort of the marketing and beyond just the product and what you're doing at Rabbit Hole?
That's a really, really great question, Chris. I mean, more and more are consumers looking to brands for advice and for understanding, more so than even politicians, I would say at this point. With the standing for something is extremely important, and following through with what you stand for is just as important.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of brands out there that will say things and not necessarily follow through on it, right? It's more of a propaganda or some sort of kind of political correctness. Here at Rabbit Hole, we believe in very core to the bone kind of beliefs and what we stand for. I mean, innovation, transparency, and authenticity are extremely important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we also believe that everybody has the opportunity to follow their dreams, the same way that Kaveh did, or the same way that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to instill that not only in our internal company and with our employees and our teams, but also portray that to a consumer basis as well, too. Don't shy away from what you stand for. I think that's the biggest advice I can give to any brand in this day and age, right? You start waffling one way or another, you're dead, right? And not necessarily what you're going to say is going to resonate with everyone. And that's okay. And that's a hard thing to really hold on to and sleep well at night, because you want everybody to love your brand. But sometimes to win and to be successful and to be authentic in who you are and what you believe in, some people aren't going to like you. And that's okay.
Totally. And you talked a lot about, becoming a media company. It was a long-term goal and being a bigger storyteller for the brand. But even just talking about standing for something and sort of being in your own lane and carving that out in a really legacy-driven category. Were there brands that were either in the category or just brands that you fell in love with, or publishers or people that you feel like are getting it right, that sort of helped inspire the story of, staying really true to your mission and doing what you guys were doing? Were there brands that sort of gave you guys that confidence or kind of taking a page out of anyone's playbook that's worth talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's so many out there, even our industry and out of our industry. But I think it's important for this conversation, Chris, to really understand the ethos behind what we believe in this marketing group over here at Rabbit Hole. We pull a lot of inspiration from outside of the industry. One of the gaps that we saw in the market was that this is, like you said, such a legacy industry. And a lot of times what happens with these industries like this and brands like this is that it's very insular. It's very kind of the inside looking in. And we were coming from the outside. We had never been in the spirits industry. None of us had been, right? And so we thought we'd bring something special. I mean, one brand that we always think about, and it's always in the back of our mind, I think a lot of brands should, is Apple, right? I mean, it's an obvious choice, but I think it's important to note. I mean, you saw what Steve Jobs would do. You'd see that he stood for what he believed in. You saw when he stood so much for what he believed in, they ousted him, but he stood steady and they brought him back, right? And inevitably, we saw the success of what Apple became because of that, because of what he stood for, and because of how important he knew that sometimes, just sometimes, the consumer might not know exactly what they want, right? And we need to be, as brands in whatever industry you're in, ahead of the curve, right? And I think that's why it's really important for Rabbit Hole to communicate with the creatives of the world, with the artists of the world. We were talking about this the other day. I don't feel like a lot of brands are giving voices to the artists, to the creatives, right? And there's a lot of this natural kind of progression into sports or into big time movies or race cars or extreme sports. But who's talking on behalf of the people who are doing amazing artwork like this, like Jeremy Booth, who's a local artist over here who does fantastic work. We partner with individuals like this in all different regards, whether that's through content or whether that's through actual art pieces or bottle design, because we're true believers. And I take this from Kaveh, who's a big art buff. I'm slowly kind of getting into it, but artists are the one who know, they're ahead of the game, right? They are the trendsetters. They know what's going to happen before us layman's over here, like myself, really do. So to hone into that voice and to respect it and to give a platform to these individuals, I think is extremely important for Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And definitely it feels like an untapped influencer audience that you guys are going after. In that vein, kind of staying with the customer, obviously, 2020 changed the world from a cultural standpoint, in a good way. And, or hopefully, continues to kind of go down that path. How do you feel like Rabbit Hole has been sort of addressing, a more diverse customer? And again, kind of going back to like the legacy world of spirits. How are you guys navigating that, in the world that we're in today?
I think, again, phenomenal question. But let's be honest. Whiskey in general is predominantly and has always been a very white male centric industry, and spirit in that case. Times are changing. Times are changing times. And we saw the tea leaves from day one coming into this business and understanding at that time, I think 30 to 35% of all whiskey drinkers were women. It's increased since then, right? You're seeing a lot of African Americans come into the whiskey industry. You're seeing a lot of immigrants coming into the bourbon category that might necessarily have predominantly been in Scotch, for example. Like my father, for example, it's been a hard trek to convince him that bourbon, we're biased, is a more superior product. But again, that stems back to also what we stand for. As I said, we believe in allowing and wanting and influencing people to follow their dreams and creating their own destiny. Well, let's be honest. Following your dreams has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with sex, gender. Mm-hmm. And so we're all about inclusivity. And we need to make sure that we brand in that way as well, too. And it sounds superficial, but it needs to be shown in our collateral. Mm-hmm. It can't just be something that we talk about. Mm-hmm. We need to highlight Black chefs. We need to highlight immigrant chefs. We need to highlight, we did a great series on chefs, so I'm just going on that. We need to highlight women chefs and allow the individual and the consumer to know that we can relate to them, that there is someone over here that is their voice, right? I think there's three things that we always talk about here, and we scream it from the top of our lungs: entertain, elevate, and educate. Mm-hmm. If we can hit those three things, we've hit gold.
Right. No, that's great. I think to that point too, obviously it sounds like you guys are, really thinking about everybody from a customer standpoint. Even your father, who sounds like might be the hardest customer to acquire. But in that vein, there's obviously a ton of choice from a medium perspective. And we talked about this too in our conversation around like attention being a big metric for you. And when you start to think about the platforms that you're using to tell the stories, I know we're going to get to some of the work you have done from a deeper storytelling standpoint, but how do you think about different platforms and different channels to really keep the attention of these either existing consumers or future consumers, knowing that there's so much out there? It's like, what's the next TikTok or what's going to be the next X? And thinking about where to focus from a platform or content. So yeah, would love to talk to you about just kind of attention overall and how you're working with that metric.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold, right, Chris? One is big philosophy of mine and our team is that we don't look at social media platforms as marketing platforms. They're conversation platforms. They give us the ability to converse with our consumers in a real intimate way. The day and age of the TV ad being blanketed across the country and hoping to God that someone is going to interact with it at the shelf is long gone, right? We have the ability through social platforms to have real conversations with humans that are interested in our brand, right? And that's why every digital marketer in the world is screaming from the top of their lungs how important engagement is, right? Impressions are great for brand awareness, but that engagement, I mean, we do a lot of correlation studies and are really kind of understanding what the impact is on shares versus likes versus comments versus commenting and then responding, and how we get that consumer to go and experience our brand. They want to feel valued and they should be valued, right? Who do we value the most? We value the consumer the most, obviously, right? And so I think that's really important, no matter what platform it is, to really understand that it's really about conversation. It's not about just throwing things at the wall and hoping that it sticks. You have to make sure that when you're testing your digital ads, that they're actually building conversation. It's not just about how many views, how many did God. It's about how many individuals did you get to go to your store locator, in our case. Then talking about a specific platform, I mean, listen, understanding the demographics of the specific platform, in my opinion, is by far one of the most important things that any marketer has to think about in this day and age, right? The person that's on Facebook, who's probably my mom and my dad, and the person who's on Instagram, who's probably my cousin and my buddy, and the woman or the guy who's on TikTok is the person who we probably are trying to get to try whiskey, right? And so understanding those demographics and age ranges and who's using it and how they're using it is extremely important in understanding what content should go through what platforms, right? That's the beauty of marketing, right? We get to decide where and how and when we want to place this content in front of the individual, right? We're doing a lot of studies right now on demand spaces, and the idea is, how do you stop the consumer prior to making the decision to purchase, during the occasion that they want to purchase, to grab rabbit hole, right? Another big thing when we're talking about social platforms is research tells us that 90% of don't quote me on the 90%, but a lot of the percent of individuals that are shopping in the store, specifically in our industry, specifically at our price level, is making the decision before they even walk into the store, right? At the comfort of their own home, researching, conversing, talking, watching videos, and then leaving the home to go and purchase for a particular product, right? We're $49 to $79 is our core range. That's an expensive product, right? It's a super premium category. And we, as marketers, need to understand that the consumer needs to make a decision whether they want to be vested in us or not. And we need to do the best job that we can to not only stand for who we are and what we believe in, but also make sure that we value the consumer in the right platform at the right time.
Totally, that makes a ton of sense. And to that point, obviously, understanding who that customer is, the different platforms, and a lot of you talked about going beyond just the ad and really creating something valuable. That kind of gets to the next point around, you obviously took that to another level and invested in a whole film series. There's no going back, which is, sounds super, out there for a brand to invest in such an interesting way. And the story you were telling me sounds like that's such a big commitment to your consumers, of how you're really caring about the storytelling side of the business. So expand a little bit more on that, of how, what that strategy has done to help you sort of understand the future of new consumers, or sort of giving that type of content to the existing consumers.
I mean, literally, this Fireside chat is not long enough for me to talk about content. I'm content. I'm screaming it from the moment I walk into the office to the moment I walk out. Yeah. I was telling you the other day, and I'm a big believer, and I might be wrong. Don't get me wrong. And, I'll take the "I told you so's" if it happens. But I am a true believer that large format, huge campaigns are a thing of the past. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars on one or two scenes of content, 25 images of content, to me sounds a little bit dated. sometimes it's as easy as just looking in the mirror, Chris, right? How much content do I digest on an everyday basis, right? How much content do you digest, right? How many TikToks do people go through? How many Instagram scrolls do they go through? How many YouTube videos do they go through? How much TV do they watch? I mean, it's just astronomical. We're digesting content at an astronomical rate right now. And so we're hitting a big, big bet on content and great storytelling and very, very high quality stuff. Some stuff that's easily digestible, some stuff that you need to really watch a full blown series, such as the There's No Going Back series. There's No Going Back is our tagline, which really stands for once you follow your dreams, once you find your passion, there's no going back to that old life. And it really stems from our founder. He was a psychologist and psychoanalyst for 20 plus years, and he decided that he was going to follow his dream and become a whiskey maker after 20 years of being a psychologist. I mean, we laugh about it, but you know, his wife's knocking on wood that he wasn't buying a Porsche for a midlife crisis, right? But so I started thinking, and we started thinking, like, there's so many individuals out there from all. There's no going back feeling, and we wanted to tell their stories in a really, really intimate way. And we wanted to take it really a step further. We wanted Kaveh, who's a psychologist, to be the one who actually does the interview with these people. So we found a hatter, Gunnar Fox. We found a musician, Alison Mossart from The Kills wanted to be involved. We found, you know, Stephen Ken was a furniture maker. We found Che Rhodes from Louisville, who's a glass blower. And we sat down with them, and Kaveh did a really amazing interview. And it wasn't just about, hey, what are you making next? Or, hey, when's your next show? It was really about, you know, what were the things in your life that influenced you to be able for you to have there's no going back moment, to go down that rabbit hole of your own. And the reason why we wanted to pick people from all walks of life is, again, that go back to what we were talking about earlier. We want to relate to a number of different individuals, right? Spirits is a real life, is the epitome of a lifestyle brand. It's there when you're happy, it's there when you're sad. And if we can show individuals and communicate with individuals from all walks of life, no matter race, gender, occupation, doesn't matter what it is, then we've really done our job. Now, the investment that you're talking about was really awesome because they actually, when I pitched this idea to a friend of mine in LA, Dilly Gent, an amazing producer, she called me literally 24 hours later. She said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah, I'm always sitting down." And she goes, "Well, guess what? Giovanni Ribisi wants to direct your films, your miniseries." I said, "You got to effing kidding me. Like, this is like 2016, 17. Like, we've probably sold 5 bottles, okay?" I'm like, "There's no way we can afford this. What are you talking about?" She's like, "Listen, he's fallen in love with the project and he really wants to kind of help out. Let's just figure out some way to make it work." And I said, "Absolutely." You know, fast forward 2-3 months later, we flew out to LA. We filmed in Stellascope, his own studio out there. What a phenomenal guy, by the way. And we actually ended up, through this process, deciding to close the series out with Kaveh actually being in front of the camera, to really hear the rabbit hole story and why all these individuals connect with each other. And again, to put it on steroids, his wife's a psychologist. She's the one who ended up interviewing him.
So wild. I love it. I feel like all these phone calls you keep getting, it's like, that's the ticket. Talk about just, you know, obviously content storytelling, you know, is something that you guys are excited about, but innovation, just around, you know, the distillery itself and the product. How curious is the customer about knowing about those types of things? And how transparent are you guys about like really helping show those types of things around the product and using that in the marketing? Obviously, you just talked about a really deep story and highlighting talent, but how much does the actual product itself kind of play into kind of a look under the hood? And are people really curious about that?
Okay, so first of all, they're so curious.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely amazing. It's a joy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit because sometimes the marketing gets a little bit out of hand and gets kind of first billing. You have no idea
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time and effort that goes into the liquid, that goes into the recipes, that goes into the curation of the barrels, that goes into the timing of the aging, that goes into the tasting, to make sure that whatever is inside of that bottle is the best possible drink that we can produce, right? It's important to say that because sometimes as marketers, it becomes a lot of glitz and glam, right? And in reality, what really, really matters is what's in the bottle, right? And so the distillery that we built is really a testament to that. It's not only state of the art, but it's extremely transparent. I would hope for you to come and visit one day. The way it's designed is that as if you walk through it, you get an actual experience where you can see every step of the process from soup to nuts. You actually see the grains flowing through the distillery from one side to the other side. You see the barrels being dumped. You see the barrels being filled. You see the bottling being bottled. You see the cooker cooking the grains. You see the grains going from the cooker to the fermentation. Everything is in plain sight. We actually do have an innovation lab and it's a sensory lab that usually is somewhere tucked away in a bin somewhere, right? Ours is literally wide open with a beautiful glass in front of it. So you can see, sometimes if you're lucky enough, you'll see Kaveh or myself in there tasting whiskey real right there and then to see if it's ready to go into the bottle. So it's awesome to see the interest of the consumer. It's awesome to see how interested people are. And, you know, we touched a little bit on the virtual tours as well, too. So that's something that we're getting into.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about that because I think you just described an experience that sounds amazing to me because like everybody is desperate to travel and do something fun in the world we're living in now. So I'll add that to my list. But talk about how clearly all of that stuff sounds amazing, the distillery and the experience, but you know, we're in a world right now where in real life experiences is challenging. Talk about how COVID sort of shook all that up. What have you guys done to sort of still tell that story that you just so eloquently talked about what the in real life experience looks like, but how did you kind of get the consumers to understand that in the world we're all living now at home?
Yeah. I mean, we live in some crazy times, man. I mean, this is like, we are going to like look back and like, I don't have any kids, but if I have kids, we'll look back and be like, you know, there was a time where we were wearing masks and you couldn't even touch people. And they're probably going to be like, Dad, we still don't touch people. So I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully that's not the case. But
Can't wait till we tell that story to somebody.
yeah, exactly.
Remember back when.
But, you know, March is when it really started to get going. You know, end of March, beginning of April, we all looked at each other and we knew that we needed to do something drastic. And we put a little committee together in the marketing team and the sales team, and we put together what we called a virtual pivot plan, right? Everything was going virtual, and we needed to be ahead of the game. And we really, really needed to make sure that not only were we able to still kind of converse with our consumers and interact with our consumers, but we needed to do it in a very unique way and in a way where their attention spans were not lost, right? And so we put together we were just whiteboarding like crazy, like throwing everything at the wall. Like what's going to go into this pivot plan? What do we need to do? And so we ended up doing like in the beginning, first 3-4 months, we were doing a different live segment on Instagram every single day. We were interviewing chefs from the James Beard Foundation. We're actually the official bourbon and American whiskey of the James Beard Foundation, Taste America. You know, food is really, really important to us. And so a couple of the really, really big ones that stood out that we knew I felt actually instinctually that it was going to last far past COVID, that ended up still being the most successful was the virtual tours and tastings. So not only did we do it on Instagram Live, but then we took it another level as well too. Like there's some e-commerce sites out there, like Caskers, for example, where they have a reserve bar where they have packages with our product. You can buy 3 or 4 bottles, and you get an email from us directly, and we set you up with one of a real tour guide that will go through a tour and a tasting with you. And we even took it so far as even doing with holiday packages out there, where if you buy it, it wasn't even mandatory. You didn't even need to buy anything. You would just sign up for a tasting and a tour. And if you happen to have Rabbit Hole, great. And if you happen to not, who cares? Mm-hmm. We just wanted people to interact with us. Mm-hmm. Another really cool thing that came out of the pandemic and quarantine was we needed a way, like I said, I keep talking about this conversing with the consumer, but we needed a direct connection with our consumer, and we needed it with Kaveh, our founder, right? We wanted people to hear his voice. We wanted him to hear his opinion. Who is he talking about? Who is he interacting with? And so we did an Instagram live segment called Kaveh's Bourbon Bunker. Yes, he has a bourbon bunker in his house. He's one of those special guys out there that we're jealous of out here. And so that became a huge success. It was every Saturday at 3 o'clock. And it was interesting. You could see as people were getting sick of the quarantine, 3, 4, 5, 6 months in, that numbers would go lower and the numbers would go higher and the numbers would go lower. So you would see that people were staying home or not staying home just through that little interaction that we were having on our Instagram Live. I mean, that was such a success that we're actually transitioning. That's IG Live now is ending, and we're transitioning him into a full-blown podcast.
That's great.
That's another thing that kind of outlasted. And then I think one thing that really, really was kind of game changer in our industry, I don't know about other industries as much, but in our industry, we have a lot of ambassadors, sales ambassadors that go into stores and I'm sorry, frozen, or do you hear me?
I can hear you.
And yeah, we have sales ambassadors that go and like make sure we have relationships with bartenders or liquor stores or whatever it may be. We developed a role. It was called the digital, and his full sole job was to just interact with, whether it was trade or with consumers or whoever, whether it was on Reddit. I was hearing Michael on the last Fireside, and really garnering and having a rabbit hole, real life person presence, not a brand presence, a person presence that was going through these different social channels and interacting on a real level. I mean, they were saying, "Hey, what's up, Adam? How's it going, Adam?" It wasn't like, "Hey, rabbit hole robot man, like who's behind this," right? And it was such a success that we actually hired another digital ambassador. I mean, COVID has, as horrible as it's been, it's changed life forever. And as marketers and as brand owners, we really just need to own it. I mean, there's nothing we can do, right? I mean, times have changed, and some things are never going to come back, right?
I love that. It's interesting because it's like in one vein, on the one side of the spectrum, you're doing, film series directed by Hollywood major talent, and then you're doing this more raw IG content too. So I love that it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. So super interesting stuff on that front. Last question, I guess, what's next for you guys? Speed ahead, we're out of the pandemic. What does life look like for the brand from a marketing standpoint and a product standpoint?
Whoa. Definitely we're excited. I mean, I was talking to Chris Moon, COO of James Beard Foundation, earlier today, and I was just like, listen, I just want to give someone a hug, but that's outside of outside of rabbit hole and what's next. But from rabbit hole standpoint, innovation is going to be a big key point. Not innovation on marketing, not innovation on virtual tours, innovation from a product standpoint. We have a lot of really amazing products in the pipe that are going to come out, that are going to be special editions, and they're going to be one-offs, and you got to grab it. And if you grab it, you got it. And these are going to be really great collectibles. And innovation from the product standpoint means different barrels, different finishes, different recipes. I mean, just fantastic spirits, right? To really hone in on that idea of craft and boutique, right? We're not this big conglomerate running around like a big kind of liner in the middle of the sea that can't stop. We're nimble. We're able to move. We're able to create. And that's core to what Rabbit Hole is. So we're really excited to be coming out with some of these releases that are going to come out soon. We're also really excited to open back up our distillery for tours. I mean, this is literally, the Napa Valley of bourbon, right? It's been empty. We're missing people. We want people to come. We want people to visit. And every day I get a call, "Are you open? Are you open?" So we're really looking forward to that as well. And then this is obviously a marketing fireside chat. What we're also really excited about is that next year, our fiscal is June to June. So really soon, in about 6 months, we are going to amplify our content to a place that I don't think anybody on my team is ready for, and I don't think the consumers are ready for. If people think that we've been making content now on a regular basis, we are looking probably to estimate somewhere around 150 to 200 pieces of original 1 to 2 minute pieces of content on a 12-month basis. That's literally about one piece of new content, not including images, not including, you know, quick little vignettes or whatever it may be. Like, we're talking real storytelling, BuzzFeed style, Red Bull style, like big group, Netflix style content that's going to come out maybe once every 2 days. So we're really excited. Those contents are going to be divided into different verticals. And I can't say too much more, but it's going to be awesome. And we're going to bring in people like the James Beard Foundation. We're going to bring people in like from all walks of life to be able to sit down and tell their stories. People like Jeremy Booth or people like Stephen Ken or whoever they may be. And I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but I think someone's got to be the voice of the creative class. You know, I think there's a creative class out there that is just being undermined, and arts are really the language of human beings. It's literally, and we need to appreciate that.
That's exciting. Awesome.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey Martin.
Great session. What a great way to end the session on a Friday afternoon talking about whiskey and bourbon, and or I should say bourbon, excuse me, and really, I love the branding of Rabbit Hole. I thought the story, Michael, was fantastic. I love the virtual tours and so forth. And maybe I missed it, but from the Gianni Ribisi story, did he ever end up making the film? I didn't. Maybe I missed that part.
Yeah, we have. We just literally went through it. It launched in November, and basically we closed it up. The last series, we were releasing one series every 2 weeks, or one series every week, and it ended in January. All of them are on YouTube. I think we garnered somewhere around 10 million views across all channels. It was absolutely phenomenal. That's awesome. It was a big homage to one of my favorite photographers in the world, Richard Avedon. So the whole thing is filmed in this beautiful, stark black and white. And Giovanni just did an amazing job of just getting real tight and real close so that you can actually see when someone's facial reactions and what they felt on the inside. So I really urge you to go check it out.
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I'm a huge Giovanni Ribisi fan, so definitely will do that. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, somebody had put a question in earlier in the chats, and I just lost that. So if you can you read it? Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Chris.
This is Michael. This is around you likening the bourbon to wine. That they've
yes, that's what it was. That's what it was.
I think what he's getting to is, and I've said this. I say a lot of things. My wife wants to kill me. I repeat a lot of things. So,
you know what I think we all do, by the way, because my wife always tells me the same thing. So
until it gets done, I will not stop screaming it. Okay. And one big thing that I'm a big advocate for, and Kava is as well, is that we can, as people, treat bourbon the same way we treat wine, right? A big conversation that Kaveh and myself have all the time is that when you go to a restaurant and you order wine, what do? What sort of mood are you in? And what are you going to eat for food, right? Is it going to be a red? Is it going to be a Pinot? Is it going to be a Cab? What is it going to be, right? But when you go to a restaurant and you order whiskey, you order by the brand. That's a very interesting thing to think about, right? Each whiskey has a different spice level, sweet level, char level. I mean, there's different ways to pair bourbon. And so that's one of the big reasons why we align with the James Beard Foundation. And when you go to these Taste America events, which are absolutely amazing, there's a virtual one coming up on March 21st. I urge you to sign up. It's 10 cities across the country, 2,000 people coming together. We have whiskey being served at all these events.